Hi, I'm Joyce Creiger, and this is Art Link. Conversations with artists, art consultants, art advisors, gallery owners, museum curators, art lovers, and art collectors. My guest today is Eva Zervos, a fine art consultant that has worked in the Boston area for the past 25 years, providing consulting services for corporations and hospitals, both local, regional, and national. I'd like to welcome Eva.
Nice to be here, Joyce.
Eva, tell me, working as an art consultant for the past 25 years, what do you love the most about it?
What I like the most about being an art consultant is the variety of work, the artists I work with, and the ability to help a client enjoy art in their space.
What's the worst part about it?
Having to buy artwork that I ultimately do not like, but I know my client likes.
I think one of the things an art consultant really specializes in is bringing to the client what they want. And I think if you could help us distinguish the difference between what an art consultant does and what a gallery does, that would be most helpful.
I think one of my strongest strengths, and something that I think an art consultant should do, is ultimately listen to the client. When I go out on an initial interview, I usually don't say a lot. People like to talk about themselves, so I go and I meet with someone and they talk a lot about their business, what their interests are. Many times they don't know what type of art they want, and the conversation then turns to me and they say, well, what do you think we should have? I usually try and do a little bit of prep work. When I meet with the client, I take a look at their marketing materials. I may see what services and what their competition does. And then I try and formulate maybe one or two sentences that come up with it's actually a sales pitch. I'm almost in marketing. If I can present a piece of artwork to a client and somehow they can relate to it and they see something in it, then it makes the whole process move a lot smoother. Then they have a sense of enjoyment because all of a sudden it's not this big mystery. It's actually a piece of artwork that they can relate to and can seem intelligent when they speak with the client and the client says, oh, I really like this piece of art. They actually can say something about it.
Can you give us an example of a client that you have done that with? What type of art have you shown them? What kind of client? What kind of work did they do, or what kind of business do they have?
Several years ago, I worked for a financial services company, and they actually had quite a large art committee, which means there were lots of people that were going to have a say in what was going to be hung in their offices. So my first interview, I look at this conference room full of faces. I had come prepared. I looked at their name, which the name of the company was Panagora Asset Management. They now are owned by Putnam Financial Services. So Panagora actually comes from two Greek words which mean all marketplace. So I thought, why don't I present to them some artwork that had subtle Grecian themes? And so I showed them a couple of different art types. One was a plaster sculpture. Some were more textured hydrocal, which is kind of like this plasticky material that looked like a fresco. Some artists that had done some monotypes that were abstractions off of ancient Greek vases. We did not necessarily use a lot of this Greek art. We did do one signature piece where I worked with an artist who would take old elements and he would cast them in hydrocal, which is a type of plaster. The artist that I worked with created an ancient Greek agora, which is a structure. So here's the structure of an agora, and he had either full figures or just faces of figures in white plaster or hydrocal that became the people that made up the marketplace. So the client really enjoyed the piece. It was sat in their boardroom, and they actually used it in their marketing materials with the little synopsis of why this piece was created. The thing that brought me a lot of joy was that the client moved 10 years later, and we were able to reposition this piece, ultimately hang it in a better location, and it still is the signature piece of their corporation.
That brings up an interesting question. How would you advise artists to best collaborate with an art consultant so that the project is the most successful?
I think when you are working on a commission project, which ultimately is having a project that is made specifically for a company or hospital, and a lot of it, again, is a marketing idea. A client says, we have these beautiful trees on the property of our hospital, and I'd like to somehow incorporate them. So this was a project for a local hospital that did have a lot of historic trees on its property. So it was this collaborative effort with a glass artist, and he took photographs and silk screened them onto the glass and then fired the glass, so they became these stained glass windows. What made the project successful was the ability of the artist to say, Eva, I have this idea. I don't know how I'm going to be able to silkscreen on glass. I've never done that before. And then it's me listening to the client, and the client saying, I am looking for something that's very specific about these trees. So the trees couldn't be these abstractions. They really wanted to be able to get a sense of that they were trees on their property. The artist was from Oregon. So I actually went out one afternoon and took 50 photographs of different trees, of pine cones, of branches. And the artist in the end actually took my photographs, came up with a new process for silk screening, and created these beautiful glass panels that hang in the hallway of the hospital.
Is this the Newton Wellesley Hospital?
Yes, it is, Joyce.
I saw that project and I love those. I actually have a photograph of those pieces.
Yes, yeah. It was a lot of fun.
I think that was a terrific installation.
Great, thank you.
But that's a great example. How do you locate the artists that you use for your projects?
I think I'm always keeping my eyes open. When I am out, I see things. When I'm driving, I see things. I think some of my favorite artists that I work with have been recommended by artists that I've worked with for a long time. They'll call up and they'll say, Eva, I have this friend, she does this. I never say no to looking at anything because I never know what a client's request is going to be down the line. Another avenue that has worked well probably and grown a lot in the last 10 years is the internet. I've always been a strong researcher, and I have very creative ways of putting in keywords into a search and coming up with what I'm looking for. I've also discovered that when you do a web search, it's more fun to hit images than look at the written word, because in looking at the images section, I can quickly go through everything. Also, there are a lot of search engines or collaborative sites where artists work together to present their art. One of them is Art Specifier, which I have done probably maybe about 6 or 7 commissions. Actually, I did actually buy a single piece of artwork too, but I really looked to see what the artists were doing, and it was a collaborative effort to create a piece.
Can you tell us about one of those projects or several of those projects and name the artists?
Sure. A project that I recently completed was for a life sciences company in Cambridge. I worked with the artist Bruce Bleach, who is on Art Specifier, and took a look at his work of assembled photographs, colors, blocks of colors, a three-dimensionality. And this particular company had ties to both Harvard and MIT. They had strong ties to Kendall Square. So I called up Bruce and I said, you did a piece from San Francisco. I liked the fact that you incorporated the skyline, and I liked the color. I sent him background material not only on the client but on the space that was currently being built out. That meant colors of the carpet, the furniture that was going in the space, and I described the client and what they were looking for. So he did a little research as far as photographs that might be appropriate. I also did my research on what I thought would work. Again, I went out and took photographs of Kendall Square. And he came up with a maquette. A maquette is a way of creating a small sample, either something you can hold or something that's visual, that gives the client a good idea of what their piece is going to look like. And Bruce did a wonderful job. He changed colors that I needed. He incorporated images that I liked. There were some images I needed him to redo, make smaller, fit into a space better. And ultimately, in the end, Bruce came from upstate New York to Cambridge. He brought his assistant. We hung the piece. The client got to stand there and meet the artist and comment about the work. They liked the fact that it incorporated the images they saw. They got to see how the piece fit perfectly in their new conference room.
Can you take us through a corporate client from the moment they say, we would like to use you or hire you, to the final outcome of the project? What are the steps along the way?
I call that a project plan. I tend to be very detail-oriented. I try and think like my client would think. I actually do a lot of research before I make a presentation. So I come to an initial meeting with the project plan. It identifies some basic things that I think together the client and I can work on so that their ultimate installation meets their goals. I listen to the client. I like to see floor plans of their new space or of their existing space. A lot of times I ask them about existing artwork that they already have. If I can present myself as someone that's willing to take a look at what they already have and reposition it, I'm not someone that just wants to come in and sell all new art to them. Sometimes it's easy as taking an existing piece of artwork, pulling it out of its frame, either reframing it, or a lot of times I have the framer restain the frame to match their new space. The way I start a project as far as selecting art and introducing art, PowerPoints. You do a PowerPoint presentation that shows them a variety of different artists that work in different materials or mediums. Sometimes I group them by theme, sometimes I make it very random. At the same time, I also give them a piece of paper that lists all the names of the artists that they're looking at. When you're working with a group of people, I think that people tend to doodle. So if I give them a piece of paper that has the names of the artists and I let them doodle, or I ask them to participate by writing yes, no, maybe, all of a sudden they are paying attention a bit more, and it gives me a sense of what they're really interested in. The next step is to actually bring a piece of artwork in and hold it up on the wall. It gives the client a sense of how the piece will finish the space and how it will look in the space. Then I usually talk about frames, matting, what different types of glass might be available, and then I oversee the installation. I like being at the installation because in many cases I switch things around. File cabinets have been placed where my art is supposed to be, or a lovely thermostat is right in the middle of a wall. So I think being there to supervise and think quickly on my feet is how best can this artwork be placed is a good thing.
How do you go about finding clients that want your services, or are you mostly called upon because they know about your work?
I find my clients in very creative ways, Joyce. I've been in this industry for a little over 25 years, and I work hard at finding new clients and keeping new clients.
If, let's say, I'm a young artist and I want to get my work in your hands to help me promote my work, what advice would you give someone? What would the steps be? how would they get your
I mean,
attention?
a lot of times, Joyce, it's like they need to make it bigger.
That's a really good answer. So one of the things that you're looking for is art that's large so that corporations can feature it in their lobbies or boardrooms.
Yes, and I think an artist may have a great idea, but then they create 3 or 4 and they're all different sizes. So again, if things are the same size, there's a consistency in how it can be installed. I know it sounds a little mechanical, but I think corporations like symmetry in some cases. And by keeping things larger, they would need less.
So you're looking for people who do a series of work or large-scale paintings.
Correct.
Are corporations buying more abstract work now, or are they buying more realistic work, or does it really depend on the client and where they're located?
I think it's a little of all of that, Joyce. I would say for my own work, the past probably 10 years, it has been more contemporary, more abstract. I had a client recently that we did abstracted nature, abstracted scientific images. I ultimately think that people like to be able to see something within the art. Whether they can identify it or they can relate to it is really how you present it.
If I was a corporation and I was the head of human resources and it was my job to find artwork for the company, why would I go to an art consultant and not go to my local gallery?
The reason it is beneficial to work with an art consultant is to draw upon all of their past experience. It also is beneficial because of timing. If I do my research and come to the table with a presentation that's well thought out, a client may not have to come to lots of meetings in order to achieve what they're looking for.
So what I hear you saying is that if you go to an art consultant, there is a lot of resources available. If you go to a gallery, you're more limited to really what they have there, the artists that they represent. Does an art consultant actually represent an artist?
I always tell my clients that an art consultant is someone that works for them. Therefore, I let them know that I do not represent artists. I don't have a staple of 20 artists that I work with. Now, galleries are a very important part because they do a lot of work on their own end to find art and make an effort to promote it and let me know that something's really good. I think the benefit of an art consultant is their creative eye in drawing on lots of resources to pull a program together that the client is going to relate to and enjoy.
What advice would you give to a young collector that's thinking about buying artwork for their home?
I would tell them to look around their art community, either galleries. Open studios are a wonderful avenue for actually meeting an artist, making a connection with an artist, seeing their work environment, and finding a path for what might be of interest to them.
How often do you find yourself going directly to a gallery versus going to an artist?
It's probably 60% artist, 40% gallery. I like the relationship of working with an artist, going to their studio, seeing what they have. I don't necessarily just look at what they're showing. I may kind of peek my head around the corner and say, oh, that looks interesting. Do you want to tell me about that? A gallery is very beneficial in that they have wonderful resources, and they also are willing to do extra research.
What is the greatest challenge that you have working with corporations?
I like to believe that there are not a lot of challenges. I find a lot of joy in what I do, and I believe that it is my job to make the challenges or difficulties not really there. My job is to bring art to a client, give them a way to relate to it, and have them enjoy it for a long time. That being said, there are glitches from time to time. people may not be as available as I need them. They may change their minds. They may have a hard time relating to what I'm trying to say. I love my clients. I know when it's a good client fit for me. We have a rapport. I take a look at their space. I understand what they're looking for. If I don't understand what they're looking for, I think I'm very good at getting them to talk, which gives me those clues.
Eva, how does an artist find you and build a working relationship with you?
In the old days, I would get lots of slides in the mail, and it was hard to go through them. You needed to write letters back. You had to post them. These days, I get lots of emails. I get telephone calls, and I never turn them down. I'm always amazed with an artist that consistently sends me information. A number of people have utilized constant contact and these email blasts.
Is that something you would suggest an artist do, or is it something that is annoying and irritating, or do you find it something helpful and something you look forward to getting?
I really enjoy receiving the information. There have been a couple situations where I will be struggling with my research and trying to come up with just that angle. It's hard because you can't always just have one idea to present to a client. You need to come up with a couple. And sometimes you have the one you know they want, but you've got to find others at the same time. Now, there was a situation where it was late, I was on my computer, I was thinking, researching, and I get this email, and I look at it, and I said, oh my goodness, thank you God, this is what I'm looking for. So I think it's keeping an open mind to what you receive, filing it away saying I may not need it now, but it's something that I think could potentially work in the future. So I think emails are great.
You have been in this business now 25 plus years. You've seen it change. If you had a crystal ball, where do you see art consultants 5 or 10 years from today?
Well, we have to evolve the way the world evolves. I think that so much more has gone digital. I think clients like technology in their art. I think technology is so much a part of every business, so that if you can present a piece of art that relates to technology or is technology in its makeup, I think clients would like that. There is a great artist in New York that takes the cover of a New York Times newspaper, and he's written an algorithm that starts at the same time every day, and it starts to drip down across the cover of the newspaper. This is in an LCD screen. And it's a constantly changing and moving piece of artwork.
So this way, as a client is having different clients come to their office, the artwork actually changes.
And as the day goes by, you no longer see the newspaper. There's also some artists that do things with projection and light. So it's more an environmental type of piece of artwork.
And you think that corporations will be open to this?
If their budget sustains it.
What is a typical budget for a small corporation that wants to begin an art collection?
I think an easy rule of thumb for a budget is $1 a square foot. But at the same time, that could be too much for some people. When I come to a meeting with the client, I usually bring a high, medium, and low price chart. So it lists the different mediums and associated costs, both high, medium, and low. And it's a way of working with the client to come up with a budget. I don't think there's an easy answer.
I think that's helpful.
I think that everyone knows what is too much, and it's just trying to figure out what that too much is. But $1 a square foot, when it's a large building, is a really good baseline. I take a look at the project, and it will say
40,000 square feet.
40,000 square feet. So then I say $40,000 budget.
Got it. Could you finish this sentence for us? Art is.
Art is inspirational. Art is something you live with. Art is something that you enjoy or that you come to appreciate over time.
With that, I think we can conclude our interview unless there's something else you'd like to discuss. You've been very thoughtful and very helpful to our audience of both artists and art lovers, and I want to thank you for coming today.
Welcome, Joyce. It's nice to be with you.
Nice to be with you too, Eva.